Welcome to The Explainer. Now, when I say algebra, most of us get a flashback to school, right? All those X's and Y's. But what if I told you the real story of algebra didn't start in a classroom, but thousands of years ago, etched onto tablets of clay? So, on one side, you've got a familiar modern algebraic equation. On the other, you have a clay tablet from ancient Mesopotamia. I mean, they look like they're from different planets. But here's the wild part. The people who made this tablet, they were solving the exact same type of problem thousands of years before anyone ever came up with the letter X. And that's really the big question we're digging into. We think of algebra as this modern, abstract thing. But what if the core ideas, the actual problem solving, are ancient? What if its roots go way, way deeper than we ever imagined? So let's talk about it. Algebra before X. Long before symbols were a thing, mathematicians in Mesopotamia were tackling what we now call quadratic equations. And they weren't just doing it for fun. They were solving real, practical problems that their civilization depended on. Okay, quadratic equation might sound a little scary, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's just an equation that involves a number multiplied by itself, a number squared. And for the Mesopotamians, this wasn't just abstract math. It was totally hands-on. It was geometry, it was the area of a square field, or the dimensions of a new building. And this is the part you really gotta get. The ideas came way before the symbols. They didn't write solve for X, but they had these amazing step-by-step procedures to get the answers they needed. The language was different for sure, but the mathematical genius, it was absolutely there. But why? Why did they even need this stuff? Well, it wasn't some academic exercise. For a civilization as big and complex as Mesopotamia, this kind of math was absolutely essential. It was basically the operating system for their entire society. I mean, just think about their daily to-do list. They had to measure farmland with incredible accuracy because agriculture was everything. They needed to divide up inheritances fairly, plan massive building projects, figure out grain storage, and run a whole complex system of taxes and trade. You can't do any of that with guesswork. It all required precise calculations. And who was at the center of all this? The scribes. Now, don't think of them as just writers. They were more like highly trained technical experts, the data scientists of their day. Their work, which they recorded on these clay tablets, had to be perfect. One little mistake could cause a building to collapse or a huge dispute over land. So, how in the world did they do it? How do you solve these complex problems without the tools we totally take for granted today? Well, this is where you can see the real genius of the Mesopotamian method shine. Their secret weapon was this number, 60. Yeah, 60. See, we count in base 10, but the Mesopotamians used a base 60 system. It sounds a little strange at first, but trust me, it was an incredibly clever way to do things. So, why 60? Well, just look at how many ways you can divide it cleanly. It's divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12. This made dealing with fractions, which you'd need all the time for dividing up land or grain, super, super simple. It was pure practical genius. Their way of solving problems was almost like following a recipe. First, they'd state the problem using words, usually describing a shape, like a field. Then they'd visualize it geometrically, literally imagining cutting up and rearranging the pieces of a rectangle. Their goal was to figure out what tiny piece was missing to complete the square. And once they had that perfect, completed square, they could easily work backward to find the answer they were looking for all along. And this right here, this is the real breakthrough. They weren't just finding one-off solutions. They created a repeatable method, a recipe, that could solve an entire category of problems. That is a monumental leap in thinking, from just dealing with the concrete to creating something abstract. Okay, so this is all really cool ancient history, but you might be wondering, what does it have to do with me? Well, it turns out the Mesopotamian legacy is all around us. In fact, you use it every single day, probably without ever thinking about it. Remember that base 60 system? The next time you check the time, you are looking at a direct echo of Mesopotamian math. Yep, the 60 minutes in an hour, the 60 seconds in a minute, that's a legacy we inherited directly from their ancient system. And it doesn't even stop there. Why are there 360 degrees in a circle? It's also from their base 60 thinking. 360 is just 6 times 60. So their number system has literally shaped how we understand both time and space. So, what's the big takeaway here? What does all this teach us? Well, when we look back at the Mesopotamians, it gives us a completely new angle on what algebra and really what math itself truly is. You can see the two worlds side by side here. Their math was verbal and geometric. It was all about solving tangible problems with clay and a stylus. Our math is symbolic and abstract, aiming to prove these universal theorems. It's not about which one is better, it's about having different tools for completely different worlds. In the end, what made their math so powerful was that it was deeply connected to real life. Every problem they solved was rooted in a real-world need: a farmer's field that needed measuring, a builder's wall that had to be perfect, or grain that needed to be stored safely. This wasn't just numbers. It was a story of human ingenuity. It just goes to show you that advanced mathematics didn't just pop out of nowhere as pure theory. It grew out of the ground, from the very real, concrete problems that people had to solve every single day. The roots of algebra aren't just in equations, they're in the earth itself.